Continuation of the work on harvest policy or harvest strategy for this year, and these are going to be two presentations, one after the other. The first one is on harvest policy consideration, focusing particularly on retrospective bias and its effect on the harvest policy, and biomass projections. The second part will be on an update of the management strategy evaluation or MSE. And for this part of the presentation, you can look at page 59 of the Blue Book or 311 of the RARA, and you're going to see the reports and figures that I'm going to be presenting here. Okay, a brief look in time into the recent history of what the target harvest rate has been for the Pacific halibut fishery from 1984 to 2011. As we see here, that's the target harvest rate year, and that's the level. We see that it has changed between a high of 35% of explorable biomass in the mid-80s to as low as 20% in recent years. This is, if you will, the target harvest rate that is determined for the core areas of the stock. This last increase here is just due to a change in the definition of EBio, so it's not actually a change in the target harvest rate, but it's a change in the definition of what EBio means, and that's work by Steven from last year. There we go. Thank you. As I mentioned, that's the target harvest rate for core areas since 2006. There has been the determination of what they're called areas of particular concern based on trends of indices and estimated status and conditions of those areas. And effectively, the target harvest rate has been reduced for those areas, 4B, 4CD, 4A, and 3B, from that overall level of 20% to 15%. So that's in terms of target. That's where we are shooting for every year we do the assessment, recommend quotas, so on and so forth. Okay, in terms of our ability to meet those targets is something that is called realized harvest rate. So the target is what we shoot for. The realized harvest rate is a realization each year of how close or how far we were from that target. And what we see here in the white columns are the most recent estimates of coastwide realized harvest rates. So as we can see here, this is from the start of the recent assessment to effectively 2011. And as we see, there has been estimated increase in the realized harvest rate since the start of the assessment up to a high in 2008, where the most basically the current estimate of realized harvest rates for 2008 was around 38%, and the target was around or less than 20%. Since 2007, with the implementation of the coastwide assessment, this slope, if you will, has been declining each year rather than increasing, but as you're going to see on the following slides, the actual level for all of this year has been changing. The figures you saw before were in terms of coastwide realized harvest rates, so increasing the target somewhere around a little bit below 20%. We don't have a coastwide target. It's just the summation, if you will, of the area by area cases. So this is the most recent estimate for each of the areas. That's the target harvest rate there. And as we see, for effectively all of the areas, we have departures from the target, and for all of them or most of them, we have departures that are above the target. So the most current estimates of realized harvest rates over the past decade have been above the target, and in some cases, like for area 2C and 2B, about 2 to almost 3 times as high as the target. As I mentioned before, those areas were determined to be areas of particular concern during the past decade, and the target harvest rate has been reduced to 0.15 instead of 0.20. So how do we get these departures? I mean, where are they coming from? Well, part of these departures come from what are called misspecifications in the model, so things we are not controlling for when we are actually setting catches. Part of that come, and you are all aware of this, because this is what basically prompted the change from closed area assessments to coastwide assessments. So this is the view that we had of the stock in 2007. This is a sequence of closed area assessments or different closed area assessments for each area by then. So at that time it was estimated same or similar increases but realized harvest rates, but the actual level itself was much smaller. So it was departing at most twice, for example, for area 2B. At that time, in 2007, it was evident, or actually before that, that halibut were continuing to migrate. Therefore, the closed area assessments were biased, and a new way to assess the population was developed, which was the coastwide assessment. In the 2007 version of that coastwide assessment actually indicated that the realized harvest rates have been much in excess than what was predicted by the closed area assessments. For example, for 2B, we will hear from being about twice as high, or basically, yeah, from 20% to 40%. This, in 2007, it was estimated by the coastwide model that it was about 60%. That's for areas effectively 2. For part of area 3 and area 4, it was actually the opposite, and the estimated realized harvest rates were smaller. So the misspecification in this case of the assessment model was actually due to the unaccounted for halibut migration. When accounted for by the coastwide assessment is that we got these different estimates of realized harvest rates. However, since 2007, if we look at the realized harvest rates for each area and also coastwide, we see there has been an upswing on the realization of what those realized harvest rates were. And as I mentioned before, in all cases, they have been estimated to be, or they're now estimated to have been higher than estimated originally in 2007. And in this case, part of the problem is the underestimation of harvest or target harvest rates at the moment of doing the year assessment effectively, and of the underestimation of the harvest rates of past years as well. That resulted in an overestimation of exploitable biomass, and this is due to an ongoing retrospective bias. So you have heard it, and you have seen probably in the documents or in the interim meeting mentions about retrospective bias, and there might be some confusion about actually what it is. Well, retrospective bias comes from, or retrospective pattern or problems come from the fact that each year the stock assessment estimates not only the most current assessment biomass, for example, 2012 biomass, but also estimates or re-estimates exploitable biomass that were initially estimated in past years. So it allows us to have only one look at the current estimate of exploitable biomass or the other biomasses, but it has several looks of biomass as estimated in the past. So retrospective bias occurs when the historical biomass series is consistently overestimated or underestimated. That is, the retrospective bias occurs when we realize that what we thought we knew in the past, actually it is not. It has been overestimated or underestimated. In our case, the recent stock assessment for Pacific halibut had consistently overestimated biomass and underestimated harvest rates, as you saw in the previous slide, due to this bias. An example of what it is, not in words but in pictures, is to look at past biases or similar biases for halibut and other fishery resources, and some of this is, most of this is discussed on the reports if you want to read more. But this is something that has been observed on assessments for Pacific halibut. In this case, this is for area 2B, British Columbia, estimated exploitable biomass in millions of pounds from 1975 to the assessment in 2004. So if you take, for example, the assessment in 1997, that was the first time that it was estimated that EBio there, and then in the following years, each assessment that came back estimated that that initial estimate actually was a high estimate because the most recent estimate suggested that I was coming down. So just to put it into the context, the first look that was done for the EBio on 2007, by which catch limits were recommended for, over the subsequent assessments was estimated to have been actually much lower than originally estimated. So this is a case basically of concern, if you will, on retrospective bias. Another case, the retrospective pattern, this is again a closed area assessment for area 3A of Central Gulf of Alaska. If we take the same years, 1997 here, that was the first time that it was looked at it, and subsequent assessments then went, it's hard to see here in the slide probably, but it went up and down from that value. So there are some trends like 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 2000, and then it comes back up. So effectively, if you follow what happened to 1997, it was estimated to change at some point, but the most recent assessment at that time, 2004, actually estimated to, the estimate of 1997 by the assessment in 2004 was actually close to the one originally made. This is not, hasn't happened only for Pacific halibut, but for other fishery resources. In this case, it's probably one of the most famous cases of retrospective patterns, and actually the one that probably brought this issue into attention for fishery management, which was retrospective issues on northern cod assessments and its effects on projections. So what we see here are these blue dots there were the first look at the EBio of that year, in this case by an assessment in 1980 and the estimate for 1980. And what we see in red here is the most recent at the time, what is not actually the actual stock, but it's the best estimate that was made years after the, those assessments were done. And that's basically the effect on the projections that those misspecifications at the time of assessment had on the process. So coming back to our case, into the recent retrospective patterns, this is based as of preliminary analysis done at the end of 2010, last year, for coastwide stock assessments for Pacific halibut. And what we see here is that this is the case for explorable biomass, and this is, for example, for the assessment in 2006. And as you see, if you just pick one of those years, for example, that's the year, the estimate that was used to recommend catches and so on and so forth. And as newer estimates of that year came in subsequent assessments, it actually came down. So as of the end of last year, this is how much the most recent assessment as of the end of last year was showing to have departed from the initial estimate. So a point that I want to make here also is like the solid lines here are the actual estimates of the trajectory for each past EBio. What we have here in dotted lines are the projections, assuming that the last year of the assessment and the first years of the projection is actually correct, that it has no bias. So those are the projections, assuming that it has no bias, has those projections in there. But this is as of last year. In this case, this is the effect of the retrospective bias on spawning biomass. So it's slightly different, but it's also present. This is as of this year. So this is, if we repeat the analysis of last year using the most recent assessment, we see that actually the pattern is still ongoing, and the retrospective bias, or the amount that that year was overestimated, our understanding of it, increased this year. So of course, the question is that this is what happened then, and it took us 5 years to realize it. The question is, this is the estimate that we have for this year. So are we far off? Are we not biased? How biased can we are at present, as part of the questions that are at present on the table. So the previous slides were showing the retrospective bias for explorable biomass and spawning biomass. In this case, it's a retrospective pattern as of, again, last year for total biomass. And I've shown a little bit of this on the analysis for potential changes in size limit. So as we see, for example, for this case, the assessment done in 2006 estimated this trend on total biomass, an increasing trend of total biomass since about year 2000. However, subsequent assessments re-estimated that trend and actually suggested that at least part of our increasing trend was actually more recently estimated to be a decreasing trend. So the previous slide was as of the end of last year. So this is the trend as of this year. This is effectively to show that this is a continuation of a retrospective bias that has been going on for a while in our assessment, and to the extent at which it is present at now or we continue into the future, it is yet to be determined. So if we just take a different look at that data and just go in at that vertical downgrading, if you will, of the initial estimate, we can produce plots that only look at how the initial value of exploitable biomass changed through the years. So in this case, in that blue rhomboid, we have the initial estimate of the 2005 exploitable biomass that was done by the assessment at the end of 2004. And what we see is like, so catches were taken based on this value, yet in the next year assessment, that it was determined that that estimate was actually an overestimate, and that value was revised downwards. So that revision downwards kept on happening through the years for the initial estimates of 2005, 2006, 2007, 8, 9, 10, and in this case 11, although it's not shown here because this is again as a preliminary analysis of last year. If we actually take into the reduction in terms of the relative reduction in terms of the initial estimate, so we always estimate the first year assuming there's no bias, so we assume there is 1, and then we see like in the second year we look at that value that we already set catches on, we find out that it has, our understanding of it was decreased by 10%, for example. The following assessment was pretty much there, and then there's some variability on it, as you can see, but it kept on coming down for the most part. That happened for all of the initial assessments since at least 2005. So this is as of last year. So the question was, well, we had that estimate at the end of that year that is there. So it is here at that point. So this is what happened when we look at the most recent assessment and the re-estimation of the value for last year. So effectively the initial estimate was revised downwards, so to something like 317, I believe, to less than 240. And in terms of overall bias or retrospective bias in 1 year was about 25% revised downwards. So the estimate that we have currently for the 2012 EBio is in that level. And in case it will be, again, if we were to 1, and of course the question is like, well, is that estimate likely to be biased or not? Or if so, how far can we be? So the retrospective pattern affects not only our estimates of EBio and total biomass, but also our estimates of spawning biomass. And this is crucial because this is the thing that we try to protect, as it was explained in the previous presentation on minimum size limit. And it's also important because based on where we are in spawning biomass relative to fish conditions, we actually, our current harvest control rule actually makes or entails to changes into the target harvest rate to actually protect the SBio. What we see here is the most recent estimates of the trajectory of spawning biomass as of the last assessment, or actually this year's assessment. And what we see here are what are called reference points, and this could be called like reference areas, if you will. So that level there is the estimate of spawning biomass in no fishing conditions. At this point here is, or this line here is what is called a threshold level, which is 30% of unfished conditions, and is a point that by our own harvest policy states that we should ratchet down the target harvest rate to account for that, if you will, precautionary area, if you want to call it that way. The SB 20% is what is called limit reference point at which the harvest policy states that fishing should stop. So as we see now, the most recent assessment indicates that the relative spawning biomass level has been estimated now to have been below the threshold level for 5 years, for 5 consecutive years, from 2006, 7, 8, 9, actually, yeah, 6, 7, 9, 10. Had we known that we were at that level at the time, actually our harvest control rule has action embedded in our harvest policy, which is to reduce the target harvest rate to take into account that level of the relative spawning biomass. So this is what it is. This is the relative level of spawning biomass to unfished. Every time you follow off this green area and you go into the yellow area, effectively what it does is it has a linear decrease in the target harvest rate. The thing is that at the time we didn't know, or it was not estimated to have been that low. Had it been estimated at the time to have been that low, the harvest control rule would have decreased the target harvest rate to these values. So effectively for the year that is estimated now to have been the lowest, it would have been about a target harvest rate of 14%. Again, this is something that would have happened in the past. It didn't happen because we were not aware of it, and so the full target harvest rate was applied to that, to those years. And again, a reminder that value was not estimated that low, but it was estimated to be, again, 43% of unfished in 2006. So currently we are, the stock assessment, most recent stock assessment estimates be 43% of unfished. And the question again is that value has the potential to be revised downwards as it did in the past? That's something that is up for the discussions. So in terms of what do we do about it? So the retrospective bias is there, has been there for a while, and the way to actually get rid of it is actually to find either the causes in the current stock assessment, fix it, and get rid of the bias, and that's something that is the purview of Stephen. It's something that he's been working on, and he's going to be presenting something on those lines into the assessment presentation. Another way is actually to have alternative either assessment or management approaches that will be able to take into account that bias or that will not have that bias, and that's what I will show as part of the MSc. So, but in the meantime, what do we do? Because the retrospective bias is there, or has been there, and is estimated to potentially to be ongoing. So what are we working here are, if you will, a way to treat the symptom if we cannot find the cure, or if we cannot find the cure as of now. That is, like, we know that this retrospective pattern has affected our ability to meet our target for past biomasses, and we can estimate by how much. So for the analysis at the end of the last year, the largest revision of any of those initial biomass that we said catches on was in the order of 30%. So a potential approach is to say, well, if we have the potential to be currently overestimating biomass by the same amount, then we should reduce the target harvest rates by the same amount to actually be able to get to those target harvest rates and not be overshooting it. And that will entail revising down target harvest rate from 0.25 to 0.15 for those areas of no particular concern. And for areas of particular concern, it will entail decreasing from 0.16 to 0.11. But that is as of last year. This year, as I mentioned, the retrospective pattern continue at about the same rate as in past years, and now we the largest overestimate of past initial estimates is in the order of 39%. So basically, that will entail that we will need to reduce the target harvest rate by that amount, and that will entail revising the target harvest rates for, to 13% or around 10%. And again, these values assuming that the maximum level of revision we have now, it is potentially what we are having this year or in subsequent years following the same approach. But we have also to make a word of caution that we actually do not know how much that initial estimate is going to be revised down, or if it is going to be revised down. But if it is going to be revised down, we can look at what happened in the past, and each year the changes in that percentage of revision actually has changed and has been larger each year. The second approach is to take at those departures that I mentioned before on the realized harvest rates with respect to the target. And in this case, this is just following two models. Stephen here is going to talk about model variance in the assessment. This is following, if we were to follow the same model fit as it was followed for the past year. And effectively, the largest departure using that model was for 2007, and that was the realized harvest rate of 32% rather than 20% that was the target. That is 61% higher than the target. So if we were to adjust the current target harvest rate to avoid similar overshootings, if this process of overestimation is continuing, that would entail revising down the current target harvest rate to 13.4 for areas of no concern, and for areas of particular concern, that will entail revising down from 16.1 to 0.10. Again, these are not reductions on the target. These are adjustments to the target to be able to reach the target if the retrospective bias is still ongoing. If we were to take another one of the model fits, again, Stephen is going to talk about different model fits for this year, then the largest departure seen so far was in 2008, and that was a realized harvest rate of 38% when the target harvest rate, or the realized, if you will, the cost-wide implied target harvest rate was less than 20%. If we assume that it was at 20%, that implies that realized harvest rates were in the order of 88% higher than the intended target. If we use that adjustment, that will entail revising downwards the target harvest rates to 11.4% or to less than 9% for areas of particular concern. Again, this is not a fix to the problem. This is just a band-aid, if you will, while the problem is dealt with. And then, as I mentioned, for the talk of current size limit, decisions have consequences or potential consequences, and a way that other fishing agencies deal with this is to actually produce decision tables that actually has a clear depiction of what things we do not know about nature and what decisions can we make, and then what is the risk that we entail when we make those decisions. So what we have here are management actions, and those are the things that we have control of. And for example, we can take an approach of adjusting target harvest rates, as for example it was shown in the previous slides, and the other management action or decision can be to continue with the application of the current level of harvest rates. And this is basically what we can do. There are things that are out there we are called states of nature, or things that we don't know that is going to happen into the future, and that's basically what is shown in these rows. So for example, in this case, some potential states of nature will be if actually the overestimation continues, or for example, if the stock continues to decline. And then other one can be, well, perhaps the retrospective issue is not present this year and it's gone away. In this case, or another way to look at this is that, well, perhaps the stock is not changing in size, or in this case, it's like, well, perhaps next year underestimation starts, and all of a sudden we are estimating less than there's out there. So based on the management action, then you can calculate both what the short-term or long-term results are expected to be, for example, in things such as yield, but also in things such as conservation concerns. So a true decision table will have, in this case, probabilities. This is just more like a contingency table, so it's simpler to read. So to read it will be, if overestimation actually continues, and again we have no control over this thing, and we actually apply adjusted target harvest rates, that will result effectively in the short term in smaller yields, because you are reducing the target harvest rate for that year. In the long term, if the overestimation still continues and the bias is still present, that will be a continuation of a smaller yield. On the other hand, under those conditions, overestimation is still continuing, and we follow with the application of current harvest rates that may result in the short term on larger yields, since you're applying the full extent of the target harvest rate. But since if overestimation is still continuing, effectively there is going to be a larger or greater implied or realized harvest rate in the future, and that will lead to conservation risk, increased conservation risk, and as was shown in the past when this thing was going on, higher than target harvest rates. So the definition of increased conservation risk that comes straight from our harvest policy, which is this is related to where our reference points are. Of course, if we make the other decision and we decide to adjust, in this case, target harvest rates, but all of a sudden the retrospective issue goes away, or actually we start to underestimate biomass, that will still result in the short term in a smaller yield. But in the long term, the moment we realize that the retrospective issue is gone, or that we actually are into a different realm of underestimation, for example, there's always the potential to return to the status quo harvest rate and apply the target rate unadjusted for a pattern that goes away when it goes away. On the other hand, well, this is not that interesting by itself, but yeah, in the case that we are applying the current target harvest rates and there's no retrospective issue or we are underestimating, that will entail to having larger yield and reevaluations of the target harvest rate. So this is all in terms of words. In terms of projections, which is the second part of this report. What we have here are EBio in millions of pounds from the beginning of the stock assessment up to the estimates for 2012, and this is estimated for the current stock assessment. So the first set of projections is what are called here status quo projections. Those are actually status quo as of last year. Those were similar to those increasing projections that we had since 2006. Effectively, what they assume is that there is no bias in the initial estimate, that the ongoing pattern of continuing reductions in size at age is going to go away as of this year, and that revisions in the estimates of past cohort strength are also going to go away. So those are the projections that we get, 5-year projections. If we actually take into account the factors that I just mentioned before, assuming not to change here, but here we're actually taking them into account. In this case is assuming that there's going to be a continuation of revisions of past estimates of cohort strength, along with continuing decline in size at age, and with revision downwards of the initial numbers of the projections. That's basically these two panels. Those are the projections for EBio if we were to adjust the current harvest rates, that is to reduce them to be able to take into account potential biases. So those are the projections, which is exportable biomass to remain, expected to remain level. And then if we were to use current harvest rates and adjust it for the patterns that are going on, assumed to be going on in this case, that will entail a continued decline in exportable biomass. In terms of spawning biomass, again, this is the same type of figure that you saw before. And the projections is like if we are assuming that everything that has been observed in the past goes away, including the bias, size at age, and the reduction of previous estimates of cohort strength. It is suggesting a rapid increase in spawning biomass over the next 5 years. If we take into account both the potential current bias on explorable biomass and the same factors that I mentioned before, if we are correcting for correcting the target harvest rate for ongoing biases, it is the projections are expected to increase the spawning biomass to the level of the reference point threshold in 5 years from now. And if we are using the current harvest rates and those assumptions still hold, we see a much smaller increase in the spawning biomass. Of course, there are many different assumptions that you can make regarding what of these processes will continue or not into the future, and those will lie somewhere, could be somewhere in between this level, and you can look at some of those in another report in the RAR, not the Blue Book. Again, the point here is not to see which one it is correct, but the potential result of decisions under alternative states of nature. The last presentation for the harvest policy is an update on where we are on the development of MSE, or a management strategy evaluation, and this is material that is included in page 7